The next patient, or next person I'd like to introduce is Emily one more time. Nespajani. It is a challenging name, and she is one of the most amazing people I've come across here in Chattanooga. She's the executive director of the Chattanooga chapter for the American Heart Association, and she is in the AHA is the world's one of the largest health organizations. Its main focus is around heart disease and stroke disease prevention, understanding it, research, and prevention. And they have a saying at the AHA. It's their mission is to have a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives, and that's really the passion behind the folks at the AHA. Emily has raised over $15 million over the last few years for American Heart Association research, for support for life-saving research and education and community impact projects. She has a true passion for public health, and I'm fortunate enough to be on one of the boards with her at the AHA and see all the amazing things that she does. And they're really focused on trying to find creative solutions for hypertension control in the region, and a policy around water access for schools, and also a tobacco policy that her board recently voted to push up to the prominence to try to get that under control for our students and our younger children. So without ado, I'll just have Emily start and hopefully give us a little more facts about what's happening with the state of affairs in Tennessee. Please, press the green button.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lassar. So a couple observations that I should probably let you guys know right from the jump. I don't have nearly as cool of pictures as I've seen since I've been sitting here, so apologies in advance. And then remind me not to go to Disney World with Dr. Gardner at the same time, so I'm not in the back of some of his photos. Just an important thing to know. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the biggest issues facing the region. This is not going to be a surprise to many of you, but we're laser focused at the American Heart Association on social determinants of health and some of the barriers that exist. And before I dive into the need and some of the statistics around this area, I just want to talk a little bit about who we are as an organization. And so Dr. Lassar just mentioned our mission is to be a relentless force for a world of longer and healthier lives. And this is a significant shift to prevention compared to what our mission was before. And so I want to make that known for those of you who may not have been actively involved with this before. But then everything that we do is based in research and through these guiding values that you see on the screen. So I think that's important to note before we dive in. And so I want to talk a little bit about the need around cardiovascular disease and stroke and some other health factors and risk factors associated with those, starting with what we already know, and that heart disease and cardiovascular diseases are America's #1 killers. But what I've noticed in my conversations is that it's becoming more and more prevalent that it's a health equity issue. And so if you think of, not only is it the #1 killer of all Americans, but 60% of Black men and women have some form of cardiovascular disease. And so there are disparities. They're disproportionately affected, and it's something that we're paying attention to. The one thing that we knew, and I like this slide because it's a really good visual demonstration of what's happened as a result of the pandemic. We knew that some of these social determinants existed, but as a result of the pandemic, a lot of the issues were exacerbated, and we could no longer ignore them. And at the American Heart Association, we became hyper-focused on some of these issues and how they might create barriers to health. And there's a lot of things that we saw happen. We saw a lot of patients no longer, even as the pandemic began to slow down before the Delta variant arrived, we saw that patients feared even going to the doctor's office for fear of contracting it. That, amongst high stress, unhealthy eating habits, and a number of other things, we anticipate a good deal number of future problems that we're going to have to be addressing sooner rather than later. But one of the more pressing items, I should say, or things that got my attention that I recently saw some new data from the CDC showing that the 2020 life expectancy for people in the United States fell by about a year and a half. And this is the biggest single-year decline since World War II, 1940s, I believe it was. And so that got my attention, and it means that, so when we look at the causes of death, heart disease obviously remained number one, cancer's behind it, but COVID-19 being the third leading cause of death in 2020. And so we can't address it without addressing some of the barriers that exist, which is primarily what I'm talking to you about today, and it's a couple things to take a look at. First is why the need is so urgent, especially when you think about race and ethnicity. This first graph shows death rates over the past 10 years, and so this overall decline shows promise, but the disparities are shocking. And so Black people are 32% more likely to die from heart disease than their white counterparts, and then stroke even more scary at 45% more likely to die. So something that we're taking a look at and paying attention to. So one of the things I'm here to talk about is some of the social determinants of health that exist and why American Heart Association and my board here locally are paying attention to that. And, we've always been hyper-focused on this groundbreaking cardiovascular research and sharing our best practices with the medical community, but that's really only the tip of the iceberg if you think about it. 20% of a person's health outcomes come from the clinical care that they receive, and the rest is really determined on some of these social determinants or socioeconomic factors and influencers in their day-to-day lives. And so we really want to create this culture of health and make the healthy choice the easy choice, but we have to sort of tackle this one thing at a time. Nutrition security is one of them. If you think about people living in lower income areas, they have significantly higher rates of unhealthy diets and food security. Something that we're looking at right here in Chattanooga, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But after nutrition security, there are a number of other risk factors and things that we need to be looking at. And I don't know how else to visually represent that other than a good old-fashioned heat map. And so I have a series of them that I want to look at. And if you see the common denominators, it's very largely prevalent in the Southeast. And so the first one is these are smoking rates as they exist right now. And then, so you can see in the Southeast, we're a bright and shining example of some of the higher rates, Tennessee included. Vaping is at epidemic levels, especially amongst young adults. And the Southeast, Tennessee, perfect example, amongst the highest of e-cigarette users. And Chattanooga is no different. In fact, we just recently pulled some reports of vaping instances in Hamilton County last year, and the youngest offender was in 3rd grade. So it's scary, and something we have made a priority at the American Heart Association to help give these children and young adults tools and resources. Education is a factor, of course, that we consider when we think about influence to health. This is a heat map again. The Southeast strikes again, Tennessee no different. And then all of these things obviously directly relate to cardiovascular disease and stroke deaths. Perfect example, the Southeast, amongst the highest death rates, Tennessee, and in our particular regional area, highly affected. Same with stroke. We are in the stroke belt, and we know that. Southeast amongst the highest here in deaths. The one thing that we're looking at is the rural health crisis that is existing currently. So when we look at health outcomes in rural America, we notice that since like the mid-1980s, the rural and urban death rates were pretty equal at that time. But since that time, that gap is quickly expanding to the tune of now we're seeing rural areas typically have 3-year shorter life expectancy compared to those living in urban areas. And of course, then by nature, the folks living in the rural areas are much more likely to die from cardiovascular diseases and stroke. And these are just some examples of some of the barriers that exist. You know, they could be individual health factors, it could be social determinants that we mentioned before, or lack of access to care. All of these things are major barriers. And a couple things to point out that we know. Recent statistics show that folks living in rural America are much more likely to use tobacco and or nicotine. They tend to be less physically active, are more likely to be obese, and they have higher rates of depression, suicide, substance abuse, an average of $10,000 less a year in annual income, and less likely to be college educated. And so there's also a large issue around transportation and when they're living in rural America. So I want to just zoom in just a little bit on Chattanooga and Hamilton County. Dr. Lassar mentioned our board of directors is looking at the snapshot of our greater regional area. And we're looking at, this just shows population and our racial composition and specifically our educational attainment here. But blood pressure is probably the most shocking issue that we're facing here in Chattanooga. This graph 1 takes a look at Medicare patients. About 61.8%, or roughly 24,000 patients, had high blood pressure. And these local numbers are significantly higher than the national average of 57%. But they are comparable to the state average of about 61%. And the graph 2 demonstrates roughly the 89,000 people in Hamilton County that have been told that they have high blood pressure, again, above state and national percentages, average, which is about 28%. And this, just an important thing to note, these are people who have communicated this to their doctor, and this is not taking into account the folks who aren't seeing a physician at all. So nutrition security is an issue here, just like it is. You think about prevalence of food deserts. The one thing we spend a lot of time talking about is that 1 in 5 kids in Hamilton County are food insecure, and we know that this number is significantly higher as a result of the pandemic. You think about the large number of students whose only meal came at the time that they were at school, and then when they were sent home during the pandemic, they suffered greatly as a result of that. And so my point to think about nutrition security is that unless we address the inequities here, we cannot address the overall health and well-being of those who need us. Obesity, this takes a look at, if you look at Hamilton County in particular, 31% of our adults are considered obese, and then 33% of our students are obese or overweight, and we know that young, obese children can develop heart disease as early as their early 20s, and it's something that we're paying attention to as well, and trying to build out resources and strategies to make our children healthier. The next thing, as I wrap up, I just want to talk about what the American Heart Association is trying to do about it. So some of these statistics or barriers are not a surprise to anyone in this room, I'm certain, but if we think about the lens, this health equity lens that we're looking at the situation through at the American Heart Association, we have made a commitment to health equity and trying to make health accessible for everybody, no matter if you live in rural America, no matter the color of your skin, no matter if you have resources available to you. And this is our impact wheel. So this shows what our core priorities are and how they play out on a community level. At the bottom here, you see that everything that we do is rooted in our research, quality of care, advocacy, access to care is a key priority. But these are sort of our 5 key priorities that we're focusing on. Women's and reducing risk in women. Heart disease is women's #1 killer. Addressing community needs. What does CPR look like in light of the pandemic, especially bystander CPR, COVID support, research as a result after COVID, ending e-cigarette and tobacco use. I cannot stress this enough. Vaping is tobacco 2.0 in a different coat. And so we're trying to make sure that students have access to resources because they are addicted. You know, I often demonstrate to folks that, and I'm surprised how many people don't know this, but in a Juul pod, one single Juul pod has the exact amount of nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes. I was doing a presentation in front of some students, and she was probably about 14 years old, and she said, "It's just water vapor. Like, you know, it's not as bad as cigarettes." And so we clearly, and they're vaping companies and are supported by Big Tobacco, and they're spending a lot of time targeting students by, you know, you can get cotton candy, you can get marshmallow flavored. It's very clear what their intent is and who they're targeting. Controlling blood pressure, which Dr. Lassar mentioned, is a very, very important focus here in Chattanooga. We are significantly higher than the national average, and so we want to make sure that we're addressing blood pressure control. And then healthy living, but specifically around the areas of improving nutrition security and access to healthy foods, and then building this overall mental well-being, which has been significantly impacted as a result of the pandemic. And so we talked a lot about these things already, but we want to make sure that we are ensuring everyone has a safe place to be physically active, has access to transportation, and also making sure that we're taking a look at our community transformation work. And we can only do this by we spend a lot of time working with other nonprofits and organizations to make sure that we aren't working in silos, but that we're making a concerted effort and not operating separately, I should say. And then speaking specifically to rural health, we have a Mission Lifeline program and trying to do better with like data collection and community-centered approach, and thinking about the role of the future of telehealth, and then making sure that we're addressing some of the research needs and gaps that exist. And then the last couple things I want to touch on are some of the resources that we have at the American Heart Association that are being utilized right here in Chattanooga. But some of these programs are specifically designed to eliminate high blood pressure, or at least help with the control of high blood pressure and or cholesterol. And those are check, change, control, and target blood pressure. We're working with a lot of locally federally qualified health clinics to institute target blood pressure with a goal of at least 70% control of high blood pressure, and even started some community-based programs. If you think about one that we're launching in January specific to a barbershop. And so you think about that trusted space. The girl who does my hair has been doing it for 14 years. She knows more about me than my brother does, and I trust her implicitly. And so you think about that same model, but also building in a connection to care. So you sit down in the chair, you're getting your hair cut, you have a conversation about high blood pressure and some of your symptoms, and you can go over and get your blood pressure taken before you leave. And if it's high, over the 120/80, then we can get you connected to free care. That's a high priority of ours in a program we're launching in January. And then the good old-fashioned heart check mark. And these are We know that if you recognize the heart check mark and those who use it, just helps them identify nutritious and healthier foods. And the recent research shows that if they've utilized that check mark before, they're 72% more likely to do it again. And then our support network. A lot of folks don't know we have this, but it's an online-based program. And so if you have patients who've suffered from chronic disease, heart disease, stroke, maybe even the caregivers themselves, this is a highly utilized network, and it just creates connection for patients. And I just was reviewing the survey results on this website and this support group, and we got an overwhelming response from those who used it, just saying that their favorite thing about this program was realizing they weren't alone. Many of these folks are living in these rural areas that I mentioned earlier, or don't have anybody or that they know that have experienced these issues. And so it's a great resource for others. So thank you so much for your time and allowing me to sort of uncover some of the barriers that exist, and hopefully with this incredible board that's on our side, we'll be able to make some progress.
Moving right along, next we have Roxanne Phillips. She's one of our nurse practitioners. She holds her doctorate in nurse practicing. And she's going to discuss smoking in the South. She's been with us now for 4 or 5 years, something like that. And she kind of heads our North Georgia practice, and it's kind of our rock in North Georgia. So without further ado, Roxanne.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conference. Thank you for coming out, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. The North Georgia office isn't new anymore, but the address is there if anyone needs it. We see people all the way halfway to Atlanta and up to the mountains. Smoking is a serious topic, but I wanted to start off with a joke. So what do you give a pumpkin who wants to quit smoking? Anybody know? A pumpkin patch. So there's one. So we've already had a review of the statistics, which is helpful. We're going to review some negative health consequences and then talk about the 5 A's of smoking cessation, discuss the approved medications. Really, I'm going to try to run through these pretty quickly, and then during the question and answer, if there's anything that you guys want to know more about, I'll do my best to help with it. Smoking kills people. It's still highly prevalent in the U.S. 34 million Americans still smoke. That's the most recent statistics. Major public health issue. Here's a question. In the U.S., which geographical region has the highest prevalence of tobacco use? How did you guys know? How did y'all know that? It's the South, followed closely by the Midwest. So 22.7%. We probably have some smokers in this room, but you don't need to raise your hand or anything. Also, which population type do you think has the highest smoking prevalence? This is a close tie also. Rural areas actually have a higher prevalence. A lot of that has to do with access to healthcare and other factors, followed closely by urban. This one I had last year, if you remember, but 34 million, we just said that. U.S. adults still smoke, which is a lot of people. So let's talk about quitting. How can we help as healthcare providers or working in healthcare, or even with someone that you know that you care about? What can we offer to improve people's outcomes? There's a lot of different medications and alternative therapies out there So what works and what doesn't. The 5 A's of quitting smoking is the process that I try to follow with everyone. So a lot of times when they come see you in the office, they've already been asked if they smoke or not. So that's the first thing to do for everyone. Hopefully it's documented that if they do smoke, what age did they start, how heavy of a smoker are they, and has there been any prior quit attempts? If so, have they been successful, and what did they use to quit smoking in the past that worked? This is a sample just to have it part of the vital signs, current, former, or never. One of my pet peeves is if it just says non-smoker. It makes a huge difference, especially with thinking about their vascular risk if they have smoked and how heavy was it. So another thing to do, the second A, is advise. So advise every patient that you have that smokes to quit smoking, even if it's just briefly. It doesn't have to be judgmental. It just needs to come from you that we strongly recommend quitting smoking, even before we ask if they're willing to give it a try or not. You really should just throw that out there. 7 out of 10 smokers want to quit, so there's more to it than just wanting to. Some studies show that patients who have seen healthcare providers aren't always asked or aren't always advised to quit like you would think. Only 57.2% in the past year reported receiving advice to quit, which is sad. So the next step is assess their willingness to change. It's been a long time since psychology class, so the different stages of change to think about. Pre-contemplation, they really haven't even thought about it. Contemplation, they know that they shouldn't smoke, they've heard that before, they're kind of thinking about it, they'll listen to you, give your spiel, but not necessarily ready to say yes to it. Preparation, they really do, they know that there's a problem to their health or other lifestyle factors and they really want to quit. Action, they've already attempted, they're cutting back, maybe on medication to quit smoking. And then maintenance, you're trying to give them support every time they come back and see you, encouragement to keep up the good work. The next A is to assist your patient to quit smoking. So this is really the big part of this that we can help with the most, because you can write prescriptions. You can offer something that they can't go pick up on their own most of the time. So counseling and medication is something that we can provide, even brief counseling or just referring to the Quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, state-funded tobacco counseling. Even brief advice is helpful. A lot of studies show that even just brief advice to quit smoking, brief counseling from a healthcare provider or someone that they trust is effective. And every time a patient comes back and they tell me, I took your advice and I quit, always just causes me to step back like, oh wow, okay, that actually does work sometimes. And it makes me think about that meme with the little baby on the beach going like that. It's like, yes, I knew you could do it. Good job. Also, some people don't have a lot of support. Their significant other may smoke. A lot of people they hang out with or at their work smoke. So their support group really needs to be your office. I mean, that should be one of the main support groups. If they need help or need resources, we should be there for our patients. Typically what I do is, I don't want to bombard people with a ton of stuff to read. I try to narrow it down. A good website is smokefree.gov. It has a lot on there, and a lot of these are interactive. So if I have a patient who really wants to quit and I have a few minutes, sometimes I'll ask, hey, is it okay if I sign you up for this really great resource that the Mayo Clinic has? It's either Mayo Clinic, becomeanx.org. So I'll just take down their phone number and email address and just plug it into the website and give them that information. They'll send text messages to the patient just to encourage them, and some of them want to and some of them don't, so that's one way you can help. 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Nicotine replacement therapy is not something, unfortunately, that's covered by insurance all the time. It's over the counter. So there is a cost factor with that. The Quit Now, the Quit lines have resources for counseling and for medication sometimes, so that's a good place to start. Smoke-free, the Smoke-free website has good motivation, finding your why, why are you doing this? And the tips from former smokers is pretty real, and is if you need extra motivation to quit, that's a good place to look. This is what the website looks like for becomeanx.org. Another thing that I've ordered off Amazon for some people and had it sent to their house, they're so close to quitting, and we're just trying to support them. This harmless cigarette is not a vape or electronic. It's just something that you can hold and help with the oral fixation. There's a soft tip if they chew their nails, or they're likely to chew on something, and you can puff on it kind of like a cigarette. Sometimes that helps. It comes with, if you purchase this, a hypnosis app, and there's something else in there, maybe some coupons for suckers or more quit smoking resources there. So let's talk about some of the medications. Of course, there's the good old FDA-approved trio Chantix, and nicotine replacement therapy and bupropion, sustained release are the three. There's some off-label medications. I've used some of these before with success, but most of the time they don't work for smoking. If you use medication in combination with counseling, you have better results. So let's talk some more about that. So Chantix, varenicline, Pfizer, I guess, was working really hard on the COVID vaccine and started putting cancer-causing ingredients in these pills, so they're no longer available. What you can do instead is you can use a Canadian medication. It's apo-varenicline, so it's like APO-varenicline, and the brand name is Champix. It's available in the U.S. now because of the Chantix recall. Because this drug was so effective for smoking, and now it's not there anymore, it's really cut down on what we're able to provide. So I've prescribed the Champix, and it takes a couple days for the pharmacy to order it, but the cost is comparable to the Chantix. Anyway, this medication works on so nicotine receptors in the brain. Whenever you smoke, the nicotine sticks, you get dopamine release. The Chantix will partially bind, and then that way it does activate some dopamine. When they smoke, after about a week, they don't get that pleasure, and so it works by that way. It does cause some side effects. It can cause nausea, vivid dreams. If you've got uncontrolled depression or bipolar, you really have a bigger issue to work on before you try to push this on someone. And it's given for a 12-week course, possibly longer. So clinical pearls that I've noticed, basically I try to be upfront about the side effects. Sometimes people have pretty bad side effects. I want to go ahead and let them know what to expect. That way they'll know whether they should decrease the dose or stop the drug. Normalize, they're going to have vivid dreams. They can have sleep disturbances. Always take the medication with a full glass of water. So you're starting one healthy habit while you're helping with absorption and decreased side effects with the Chantix. Another medication that's approved for this purpose is an antidepressant, bupropion sustained release, or Wellbutrin. Zyban is the name of the smoking cessation approval brand name. So this is also for about a 12-week course. Most of the patients that use bupropion and are successful at quitting need to be on that just long term to help with, relapse and things like that. So you do it twice a day, but you tell your patient, take it once a day for about the first 3 to get your body used to it. Sometimes people can't tolerate twice daily. Contraindicated if they've had a history of seizures, alcoholism, cirrhosis, bipolar, because it can actually cause mania, and it's been shown to cause rage. If you've got an angry, person that has a lot of rage issues, you're not going to want to prescribe them this medication because that's not going to be good. Side effects, common dry mouth, insomnia, and it can make their blood pressure bump up a little bit too. I didn't mention with the Chantix, you want to set your quit date, decide on your quit date about 1 week to 12 weeks after starting the medication. For the bupropion, you want to take the medication for a couple weeks and then pick your quit date. So if you're also seeing a patient for hypertension, it's really a great thing to do a telemedicine follow-up, see how they're doing with their blood pressure, and then smoking. You're not going to want to prescribe bupropion if their blood pressure is not controlled, because it will for sure not be controlled next time. This is a good choice for those that just aren't convinced that they want to quit smoking because they're fearful of weight gain, especially if they struggled with obesity or they've quit in the past and gained 30 pounds. They're not going to want to do that again. So that can help to reduce that weight gain. It's been shown by research that it can help with that. Another clinical pearl is it can cause insomnia or trouble sleeping if you take the second dose too late. So usually I'll tell people first dose first thing in the morning, and then second dose maybe a little bit after lunchtime, 2-3 o'clock, and that will help with that. Nicotine replacement therapy is it works. It's a really good option. A lot of patients that have been successful in quitting, good majority will say, I had a major surgery or a crisis, heart attack, vascular surgery. They got a patch in the hospital, and they did well with that, and they haven't gone back to smoking. So it's really helpful if they're highly addicted to nicotine. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night to smoke, if you have your first cigarette super fast in the morning, then this is going to be helpful. You need to use the patch plus a lozenge or gum or something for that, for a fast burst of nicotine when you have a craving. The dosages are there, and you kind of taper them down. And this also can cause some trouble sleeping. Just tell them to remove the patch before they go to bed if that's the case. And you need to use something else with this, like a behavioral aspect to try to help you to quit as well with the nicotine replacement. There's the instructions. With the gum, it's not like regular gum, of course. You chew it until you get like the burning sensation or peppery taste, and then kind of park it somewhere. And then you can chew it again to like reactivate it. The lozenge, people usually like more than the gum. In my experience, it's not as obvious, and you kind of just tuck it in between your cheek until you feel a tingle, and then you move it to a different place. And you can use those like once an hour if needed. So the final A, arrange for follow-up. So if you talk to someone about smoking, hey, do you want to come back and talk about this? Do you want me to give you a call? Would you like for me to refer you to quit smoking counseling? So those are the type of things to do for follow-up. We typically will do the smoking cessation counseling during their follow-up visit, and then we can do a telemedicine follow-up in about 3 to 4 weeks to see, one, if they are if they need a refill of the medication, is it working, what's the quit date, and for some accountability. To make sure you're getting money for your time, you can bill for smoking cessation, of course. basically 8 sessions per year, 2 cessation attempts per year. So the CPT codes are listed here, and there's the average reimbursement, greater than 10 minutes there, 3 to 10 minutes, $15. You just have to document what type of smoking cessation counseling you provided, and it just needs to be a separate and significant service to be paid for. So, and I'll also include your ICD-10 code that shows some tobacco use, which are here. Always encourage your patients to quit. Whenever I have a patient come back, they tell me I quit smoking. They're so happy. I'm like, oh, great. How'd you quit? Oh, my cardiologist just wouldn't stop nagging me about it. And I'm kind of like, oh, I wish it was me that was nagging you about it. I look back, I'm like, I didn't even talk to you about it last time. So just try to be aware of their smoking status, and, brief counseling works just as well. Some studies show if you use counseling, which could be just giving them that 1-800-QUIT-NOW or signing them up for an app, plus the medication is going to be more effective. Vintage tobacco ads. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Monica Chamberlain. Monica has been with us now for, I think, 3 years. She's been a nurse practitioner for 9 years. She has her doctorate in nursing practice. She previously was a hospitalist with the Memorial inpatient group and came to us, and she manages all of our inpatient patients and keeps our hair from going prematurely gray. But she's going to discuss cholesterol, the cholesterol problem, and why statins should be in the water. So, Monica?
Thank y'all for sticking it out. It's been a long day. All right, the cholesterol question. There's some alarming statistics. There's 94 million adults that have total cholesterol over 200, and there's 28 million adults that have a total cholesterol of over 240. 7% of the U.S. children have high total cholesterol, and actually my daughter was in this category when she was about 10. Her pediatrician burst her bubble and told her that she couldn't have any more fettuccine Alfredo. So. Still to this day, she will not eat fettuccine Alfredo. Only about 47 million people are taking cholesterol medicine, and that's less than half the population who need it that are taking it. We can do better through collaborative efforts with primary care, vascular, and cardiology services. This slide shows graphic concentration of those states with the highest population of those with elevated cholesterol levels. Obviously, the South has some work to do. This slide, first of all, what is cholesterol and why is it needed? Cholesterol is a soft, fat-like substance found in the bloodstream and the cells of your body. Your body needs cholesterol. All the cell walls are made of cholesterol. It is also needed for the production of various hormones. Hormones are needed for various regulatory processes in the body. This slide again shows a graphic visual of cardiovascular deaths due to cholesterol. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the U.S. Approximately 1 person dies every 37 seconds from cardiovascular disease. Gaining control of the cholesterol epidemic would help save life and decrease the number of deaths from cardiovascular disease and PAD. There are several types of cholesterol, but these are the ones that are most frequently measured and what we talk about usually. The HDL is high density, and that is your good cholesterol. LDL is your low density, and that's the bad cholesterol. Triglycerides and total cholesterol. For our high density cholesterol, the goal is 60 milligrams per deciliter or higher, preferably higher. Low density, the goal is 100 or less, and for diabetics, it's 70 or less. And this is a slide that's showing how cholesterol builds up on the inner walls of arteries and causes blockages, not just in the coronary arteries, but arteries all over your body. Your body's not choosy, and so it deposits cholesterol everywhere. Triglycerides, it's a type of fat in your blood that your body uses for energy. The goal for triglycerides is 150 milligrams or less. And total cholesterol, the total amount of cholesterol is the HDL, LDL, and triglycerides together. And your total cholesterol needs to be 200 milligrams per deciliter or less. And if you remember at the front of the presentation, there's 94 million adults that have total cholesterol over 200, and there's 28 million adults with over 240. So that is significant. Risk factors for developing atherosclerosis. Number one, genetics. You can't change genetics. Some people are genetically predisposed to developing high cholesterol. Screening patients and getting them on medication early can help prevent atherosclerosis from developing. Smoking, it's the easiest to recognize, but it's the hardest to get patients to quit. And Roxanne just did a wonderful presentation on quitting smoking. Obesity, sedentary lifestyle, and poor diet, and a high-fat diet, they all contribute for developing high cholesterol and atherosclerosis. This slide depicts how plaque from high cholesterol builds up on the inner walls of the arteries and becomes atherosclerosis. You can see how it's at the very beginning, it's nice and open. At the end, it's hard and narrow, hard for the blood to flow through. The Framingham Cardiovascular Risk Assessment is a tool that can be used to determine a 10-year risk of patients developing cardiovascular disease. You just plug in all the information of your patient into the little slots there, and the points scored determines your risk percentage. If patients see this sometimes, this motivates them to change the risk factors that we just talked about. And then atherosclerosis leads to not only coronary artery disease, but also peripheral artery disease, or PAD. PAD is a narrowing of the peripheral arteries that carry blood away from the heart to other parts of the body. The most common type is lower extremity PAD, and common symptoms include cramping, fatigue, aching, pain, discomfort in the leg or hip muscles, walking or climbing stairs. I usually, at the hospital, I talk to the patients and they tell me that, they can't walk very far. They have to use the little carts in the Walmart to go shopping. So that's all symptoms of PAD. Treatment options for high cholesterol includes lifestyle changes, which can be very effective, but also there's medications, and we'll discuss each of these in more detail. So stop smoking. It's probably one of the hardest things for patients to accomplish. We have options, like Roxanne just said, such as Nicoderm patch, nicotine gum, Chantix, Boost Bar, Wellbutrin. All of those are all helpful. Your diet is incredibly important in maintaining cholesterol levels. The saying, "you are what you eat," is very true. There's been a huge movement in vegan and vegetarian diets. You'd have to be under a rock if you haven't noticed an explosion of plant-based products recently, including like the Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat, Morningstar Farms. There's commercials everywhere on TV that say all this. Makes me happy because I am plant-based. Some famous people that have gone vegan for health reasons include Bill Clinton after a quadruple bypass, Tom Brady, everybody's favorite quarterback, and Ariana Grande for those music fans that watch The Voice. But if being vegan or vegetarian is too limiting for folks, it is recommended to follow a Mediterranean diet or a DASH diet. This is low fat, low sugar, chicken, fish, and turkey for protein, and moderate use of dairy. Exercise, we encourage walking for our patients. We encourage them to start walking with 5 minutes a day and gradually work up to 30 minutes, at least 3 to 4 times per week. Cardiovascular exercise also helps to reduce atherosclerosis. And sleep. Sleep, we are a sleep-deprived society. Getting 8 hours of sleep a night helps to release hormones. We talked about hormones. They specifically help regulate the body. Cortisol is a specific hormone that has a direct link to obesity. And weight loss through diet and exercise that helps to reduce the risk of developing diabetes. Medications that we can use to control cholesterol include statins, which are the most popular, Zetia, bile acid sequestrants, and PCSK9 inhibitors, and lomidopide and mipomycin. Statins, they are known as the HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors. They work in the liver to prevent cholesterol from forming. This reduces the amount of cholesterol circulating in the blood. They lower the LDL, they lower triglycerides, and raise the HDL. Here's some examples of statins. You can't just throw somebody on a statin, though, because they are not all created equal. Some are more effective than others. So, which brings us to a couple of statin studies. Specifically, the STELLAR trial done in 2004 compared the effects of rosuvastatin versus atorvastatin, simvastatin, and pravastatin with doses of 10, 20, and 40 milligrams. It was a randomized study with 2,268 patients for 6 weeks. Rosuvastatin reduced non-HDL cholesterol 42 to 51% compared to atorvastatin, that was 34 to 48%. And simvastatin was 26 to 41%, and pravastatin was 18 to 27%. So Crestor was excellent. The next one was a CURB study, and that was done in 1998. It compared the dose efficacy of atorvastatin 10, 20, 40, and 80 milligrams to simvastatin 10, 20, 40, pravastatin 10, 20, and 40, lovastatin 20, 40, and 80 milligrams, and fluvastatin 20 and 40 milligrams. There were 534 patients. They had this study for 8 weeks. And the conclusion of the study, the atorvastatin 10, 20, and 40 milligrams produced greater reductions in total cholesterol than the milligram equivalent doses of simvastatin, pravastatin, lovastatin, and fluvastatin. There were no incidences of persistent elevations in liver enzymes or myositis. Zetia, it interacts with the cholesterol transporters in the small intestine and blocks the intestinal absorption of cholesterol. This reduces the level of serum cholesterol. Effects are reduced cholesterol stores in the liver and reduced LDL, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. Zetia may be used in conjunction with statins and fibrates. Bile acid sequestrants remove cholesterol by removing bile acids. Equestrian, I think, and Welchol, that's probably the two most common that I've seen. PCSK9 inhibitors, they are agents that target the inactivate protein convertase. I can't even say all that. So it's PCSK9, a hepatic protease that attaches and internalizes LDL receptors into lysosomes. This medication is expensive. It's a sub-Q injection, and it's usually given once a month. Typically, you need to write a letter to the insurance company to get approved, and you need to show that you've had statins before and other methods first before they'll pay for it. Lomidopide works through inhibition of the microsomal triglyceride transfer protein, the MTP. MTP is involved in the loading of triglyceride onto apolipoprotein B100, which is a part of the assembly process of VLDL, the very low-density lipoprotein. Lometapide reduces VLDL release and triglyceride secretion, which leads to the reduction of LDL. There is an increased risk of elevated liver enzymes and fat accumulation in the liver, which is known as NASH syndrome. And Mipomericin binds to the apolipoprotein B100 mRNA. It blocks the translation of the gene product. This is a reduction in production of ApoB100 results, and it reduced liver production of VLDL. It is also given by sub-Q injection. There is a serious risk of liver damage, and so this is only used under very close supervision. Side effects of all of these drugs, I left that inadvertently blank, but one statin may cause, one side effect is myositis, that's muscle cramps. That's the most common. Doesn't mean that you can't take a statin, it just means that you need to try another. And if you try another and you get the same muscle aches, then you can go to a different medication or a different line. GI symptoms, usually nausea, vomiting, sometimes you have cold, flu-like symptoms. These all usually dissipate with continued use. And then it is recommended to monitor liver enzymes every 3 to 4 months. So in summary, we encourage our patients to eat healthy and to exercise, take your medications as prescribed, to get plenty of sleep, and to stop smoking. The end.
Can we have the lecturers, please, up for questioning? Have a seat. Whew. It's been, we're just chock full of information on this last session. Is there any specific questions that you have for our guest lecturers? You know, Emily, I guess one of the things I was thinking about, listening to the conversations about smoking, conversations about the hypercholesterolemia that we kind of face in this country, in this region, specific region. Are there any specific things that the primary care can gather from the AHA that, as far as a support network or some kind of resource that they can contact into that could actually help with specific problems like this?
Yes, American Heart Association has quite a few smoking cessation resources. And then we're also, like, speaking of the vaping epidemic, we have a number of resources for schools, if you think about that, are non-punitive, so, and restorative, that are available online. And just like any big organization, everything's readily available at their fingertips at heart.org. But we do have a number of resources.
I think Dr. Lassar sort of asked what I was going to asked what I was going to ask. I know there's some obesity we all know the South is not scoring very high today. But when you look at obesity, there are some programs that target children that are obese because obese children become obese adults. Is there any other programs that target the school-age child so that they don't grow up to be this statistic in the South?
Yes, that's a great question. We actually reformatted our old, as many of you might know, as our Jump Rope for Heart program, and it's now referred to as Kids Heart Challenge because we recognized that we needed to focus on whole body wellness for the students because it needed to be more than just like the physical activity, but also teaching them how to put more color on their plate, how to avoid smoking and vaping, drinking more water. And so it's a whole school-based curriculum that's available across the entire United States, and we believe that it's making an impact. And it's resource-based, and they have incentives. And you think about what makes a child excited, like we've got the little, they get like keychains for if they do so much physical activity that week, or if they drank so much water. So just reinforcing those positive behaviors that will hopefully teach them as an adult to continue throughout their life.
We do so much active disease management, risk factor management. That's just kind of our world. But if we can change it from the beginning as far as preventative health, I mean, that's really kind of where it's at. So I applaud your efforts, and thank you, ladies, for your conversations today.